So Dakota, go ahead and give Lauren a thumbs up if we're good. We're good? Okay. So this is a virtual event for us, our first, so go ahead and give us a little bit of help if we're not sharing our screen correctly or you can't hear us. My name is Brenna Clower. I'm an instructor here in the Department of Animal Sciences. I'm also the coach and coordinator of the meat judging team, and I'm a proud CSU RAM alum. Today, we're gonna show you guys a beef carcass. We're gonna talk a little bit about beef quality grading, and then we're also gonna go over some really simple tips and tricks for barbecue for you guys to do at home. Before we get into the virtual hands-on portion of this, I want to talk a little bit about this facility. We are here in the JBS Global Food Innovation Center in honor of Gary and Kay Smith, or the GFIC as I will call it from here on out. The GFIC was completed in December of 2018, largely in part due to the generous donations from our industry sponsors and supporters. The GFIC gives students the expertise and skills that are required to be industry leaders within meat science. And here they will learn how to harvest meat, fabricate, learn about meat safety and quality, and also about animal welfare. This is a student-run facility that processes meat for courses within the department, also conducts research and industry seminars, and even runs a retail sales counter through this building. It's called Ram Country Meats, and that's sponsored through the Where Food Comes From market. If you're interested in buying meat from Ram Country Meats, please visit ramcountrymeats.colorstate.edu. From there, you can see the wide inventory that we have. Our students have been working really hard to make a lot of different sausages lately. And so you can see what we have for sale, and also there's some instructions on how to complete your purchase. Also a part of the meat science program is the CSU meat judging team, which I'm coaching and coordinating. The CSU meat judging team is an elite group of undergraduate students that compete on a national level, evaluating beef, pork, and lamb cuts for yield and quality characteristics. These students must excel academically, and along with excelling as meat judgers, so that they can represent our university well on a national level. We want to make sure that every student that wants to meat judge and wants to put in the hours and dedication can. So meat judging is free to students, including all travel and contest registration. In order to cover these costs, the meat judging team does run a successful meat catering business out of this facility. Our meat catering business caters anywhere from 25 to 500 plus people, and we do specialize in Southern style barbecue and protein focused entrees, but we can really do anything that you guys need. So once things calm down a little bit here in the world and you guys do start to have events again, go ahead and reach out and see if our catering services or what you guys need for your event, we can do on campus, we can do on campus or anywhere around the Fort Collins area. So you could email meatjudging@colorstate.edu for those. I will preface the barbecue segment of our event tonight with, there is no one right way to barbecue unless you ask a barbecue expert and then their way to barbecue is the correct way. But there is literally millions of different ways to barbecue any cut imaginable. So I will say that what we're gonna talk about tonight is very simple and is a really basic intro for you guys at home. And whether you have a Traeger or a Big Green Egg or whatever kind of smoker you have, look online. When in doubt, Google it. There's so many forums and blogs for you guys to look at to see exactly how to cook or to smoke that piece of meat or whatever item you have. And there's some really great resources out there. Today's really just a basic intro. And if we do have some barbecue experts, and if I say something or we have a tip that maybe you guys have a different way to do it, go ahead and write it in the chat, and the other people participating can see that tip as well. Most of everything that we do today will be based on how we cater from this facility. I do have 3 people helping me today. So I have Lauren holding the camera right now. Lauren is a junior in animal sciences, or a freshman going to be a sophomore in the animal sciences department. And then we have Lauren and Libby in our kitchen. Libby is a recent graduate of the animal sciences department, and Lauren is a junior. And all 3 of them are past and current members of the CSU meat judging team. So if you go ahead and follow me, we're gonna go ahead and enter our secure area. So as I said earlier, this facility really teaches students every aspect of meat science. So that's anywhere from animal welfare in our live animal handling segment, and then we have our harvest floor where students can learn the harvest aspect of meat science. We also have our fabrication floor, where you can fabricate and cut that carcass into into your primals and retail cuts. We also can do ready to eat or fully cooked meats, which would be like your beef jerkies, your some sausages, snack sticks. So, and then we also have our culinary kitchen. So with all those, we really can teach the students a wide variety of parts of meat science. So we're now entering the Colorado Premium Meat Laboratory Processing. I'm gonna go ahead and put my gloves on for food safety. I'm gonna put it on a selfie view. So here we are in the meat processing facility. This is a temperature controlled room, so it is a little bit loud. I apologize, but we need to keep the fans running for meat safety to keep this carcass cool. So I don't know how many of you guys have seen a full beef carcass before, but this is a full beef carcass. It is a little bit intimidating for its size, but I'm gonna talk a little bit about the different parts that we have here. And if you guys have a question about where a product comes from, go ahead and type it in the chat, and hopefully Dakota can read it out to me so I can hear it. Hopefully I know the answer as well. I know most of the cuts, but there's a lot of different innovative cuts that people have right now. So this beef carcass is approximately 1,100 pounds, which means the live animal was about 1,800 pounds, depending on a lot of different factors. So this is a larger beef carcass. It's of the Angus breed. So you might hear about certified Angus beef or different programs like that. This was of an Angus breed. I'll go ahead and check for any questions. Dakota, just so you know, I can't see the chat function on here. Okay, so we do have one question. Where does the tri-tip come from? That's actually one I was going to show you, so that's good. So we'll start with the round on the top, which would be at the back leg. So when you think about your working muscles, the muscles that move more, especially on a four-legged animal, they're going to be a little bit tougher. They're going to have more connective tissue. Dakota, I can see the chat. They're going to have more connective tissue. And so you're going to want to cook those low and slow is what we would say. So you want to cook them in a smoker or maybe a crock pot, things like that. So up there, that round, that hind leg is going to be our slow and low. So we have a question of where is the tri-tip? I don't know if Lauren's quite tall enough to point it out, but it's going to come from that back portion of the round right there and sit right where about that dark meat is lying underneath. So then if we go ahead and turn this carcass around a little bit, it's pretty heavy, it's hard to move. Okay, so next we have our sirloin section. So our sirloin section is in between the round and sort of the back of that animal. So the sirloin is where you would get your top sirloin steaks from, and also the picanha, which is a really popular cut or roast in South America. So that would be our sirloin section. Next we have our loin. Our loin is going to be that portion that Lauren's pointing out right now. That's going to be comprised mainly of the longissimus dorsi muscle and also the tenderloin. So the tenderloin is going to lie underneath this kidney, pelvic, and heart fat right here. Because it lies within the body cavity, it doesn't do a lot of work. So that's why, hence the name, it is so tender, the tenderloin. So from this loin, you can get your tenderloin steaks or roasts. You can also get T-bone steaks, porterhouse steaks, which are going to come a little bit towards the top of the animal or the back of the animal. And then also your New York strip steaks, which are comprised of that longissimus dorsi muscle that runs the entire length of the back. I'm going to go ahead and check the chat really quick. The hardest and easiest cuts to cook or to cut out, there's definitely a difference. I would say if you like grilling, then what we would call the middle meats are the easiest to grill. But if you want to put something in the crock pot and walk away, you could easily get some of those roasts from the top and bottom of the animal. In terms of fabricating the meat, the harder ones are going to be, I personally think, taking the roast out of the shoulder and the back of the animal, because you really have to have a lot of knife skills to know where you're cutting, find those seams between the muscles, and be really knowledgeable about where those cuts come from. Okay, so next we're going to move on to the rib section. So that is where your rib eye sticks are going to come out of. So that again is comprised mainly of the longissimus dorsi muscle. So animals, these beef carcasses have 13 ribs. So we would say rib that carcass between the 12th and 13th rib. The top would be your loin. The bottom would be your rib eye roll. And so you're going to have your longissimus dorsi within that ribeye muscle, and also the spinalis dorsi, which is that outside muscle that many meat scientists say is their favorite muscle to eat. Next, we're going to have the chuck of the animal, or the shoulder. So just like I was talking about on the round, these are going to be more moving muscles, working muscles, and they're going to be a little bit tougher. So you're going to want to cook some of those slow and low. I will say that there's a lot of new innovative cuts, people pulling out specific muscles, and so not every muscle you have to cook one way or the other. But just generally, the roast coming out of the chuck, you're going to want to cook low and slow. And then lastly, I will show you guys the brisket, because we're going to be talking about the brisket later. So that's going to be this chest portion of the animal here, from about here to here. So one thing I will say is we think about a beef carcass and people want the tri-tip, or they want the brisket. There's only 2 tri-tips and 2 briskets per animal. So that's why those cuts are a little bit harder to come by or to find, because you can get 10 or so plus ribeye steaks or 10 New York strip steaks from one side of a carcass. So 20 plus for the animal. You only get 2 briskets and 2 tri-tips. So that's something to keep in mind when you guys are trying to purchase meat, is just understanding where it's coming from on the animal. Is it a whole muscle or is it a piece of a muscle? Okay, so that's all I had for the beef carcass here. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to see. Okay, here's one more chat question. What's the difference between a flank steak and a skirt steak? Ooh, I'm trying to think. My meat science knowledge is blanking me on the flank steak. So the skirt steak I know is going to come out of this section here, the inside of the animal. And if any of my meat science friends are watching, go ahead and put it in the chat with the difference. But your skirt steak is going to be lying on the inside of that cavity, and that's going to be really good for grilling. You don't want to cook that too long, but you do want to make sure you're peeling the outside kind of layer of that off, just so that it doesn't get super tough when you're eating it. But grilling those is definitely the best way to go on the skirt steak. Okay, so next we're going to move on to, let me flip it around. Okay, we're going to move on to some different steaks. So when you guys are purchasing steaks at the grocery store or a restaurant, you're often seeing USDA Choice, Prime, Select, and what does that mean? So here we have 3 New York strip steaks. So they're all comprised of that longissimus dorsi muscle, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what these grades mean. So when you see USDA, so that can mean several different things. It primarily would mean that it's inspected from the USDA from a food safety standpoint. So this facility that we have here is USDA inspected for resale. So if it has a quality grade stamp like Select, Choice, or Prime, that's talking about the eating characteristics, not about the food safety. That would be what that steak would taste like, or the eating quality. So here, Select, is going to be on the lower end of our quality, but again, all 3 of these are very high cuts of meat. They all come from young, well-fed cattle. Select is going to be a little bit leaner. It's going to have less fat, and we're not talking about the fat on the outside, but rather the fat on the inside. So the fat on the inside would be referred to as marbling or intramuscular fat. So Select is going to have very slight amount of marbling, how we would say in the meat science industry. It's going to be really good for those people that want a very lean steak. That would be your Select option. It's going to be a little bit cheaper just because it's slightly lower quality because it has less of that marbling. Next, we're going to move on to USDA Choice. USDA Choice is the most common grade of meat that you can find. It's a very high quality, and you can see that it has a greater amount of marbling between the muscle fibers. So again, not the fat on the outside, but the fat within the muscle. This is going to result in a more flavorful, juicy steak, and for most people, a better eating experience. But again, it really depends on your preference. See if we have any questions. Okay, we're good. Next, we're going to move on to USDA Prime. This would be of the highest quality in the United States. Some different countries have some different levels above Prime based on their animal breeds. So USDA Prime is going to be the highest that the USDA grading system goes. This is going to have a slightly abundant to an abundant amount of marbling, as we would say in the meat science industry. This is going to result in the most flavorful, most juicy, and probably the most tender steak. so it'll result in the best eating experience. But these are only produced at about, in January of this year, about 9% of the fed cattle or the young, well-fed cattle. So this is going to be a little bit more expensive. You would typically find these in higher end restaurants or hotel chains, things like that. So USDA Prime is of the highest grade, but again, it's going to cost you a little bit more. So those are our 3 main grades. I'll go ahead and check the chat to see if we have any questions. Okay, so we're good on the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it over to Lauren that's in our kitchen. If we can switch the camera now, and she'll talk a little bit about pork seasoning.
Lauren, we can't hear you, my friend.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
All right. Hi there, welcome to the Out Family Kitchen. Today, I'm going to show you how to properly season a pork Boston butt. To get started, we have each of our different spices labeled. And so you're gonna first start out with a cup of salt. Then you're going to use a cup of paprika. Then you're going to add 1.5 cups of brown sugar for a little sweetness. And then you're going to use a 1/4 cup of lemon pepper. Then you're going to use 2 tablespoons of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of chili powder for a little spiciness. Then you're going to use 2 tablespoons of black pepper, 2 tablespoons of onion powder, 1 tablespoon of cumin, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And most people think cinnamon is an odd spice to put in barbecue, but it is actually so popular. And then finally, you're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And you can adjust these different seasonings based on your liking and what kind of flavor you want to get out of your product. Then once you have everything in the bowl, you're going to mix thoroughly so everything is evenly distributed. Then once everything is distributed in your bowl, you're going to set 1/3 of it in a separate bowl for the finished product to prevent cross-contamination. Now we are going to show you how to season the pork butt. Okay, so can you guys hear me? I'm looking at the chat right now. Oh, okay. Now I'm unmuted. Now can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So while Lauren is seasoning this pork butt, I'm going to talk a little bit about, as we keep referring to, a pork butt. It's a little bit deceiving, so we'd actually call it a pork Boston butt, and it does not come from the hind end of the animal. So the pork Boston butt actually is going to come from the shoulder of the animal, right next to the picnic shoulder, not the ham end. So you're going to want to use, if you're making a pulled pork, you're going to want to use somewhere in the shoulder because it has more fat. And it's going to result in a moister product. If you use something from the ham end, it's not going to pull as well, and it's not going to be as moist. It might be a little bit dried out, just because the ham end is so much leaner, especially in these hogs. So as we talk about seasoning amount, we prefer to season 2 to 3% the weight of the meat. But I know you guys are at home in a kitchen and you're probably not going to weigh out everything. So I would say just apply a generous amount. Don't be afraid to put too much, because the more you put on, the more of that flavor is going to get into the meat as you smoke it. And so as you can see, Lauren's putting it on all the different sides, quite a heavy amount. So don't be afraid to put too much, because that's where you want a lot of that flavor to come in. Did you mention about reserving some seasoning?
Yes.
Okay. So she mentioned the reserving of seasoning. So now we're going to head over to the smoker, and Libby's going to take it away.
We cannot currently hear you.
We're working on it. Hold on one second.
No problem. Thank you.
That was weird. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
I can hear you. Yep. Cool.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. So welcome to our industrial commercial smoker. We use this large smoker because we have a lot of product that we cooked at one certain time. As you can see where this candle is right over here, that's where we insert our firewood. We like hickory firewood, so it's just personal preference. With our firewood, we do like to smoke it in water for about 15 to 20 minutes before we do put it in there, just because when it does ignite, when the firewood does catch fire, it can sometimes raise the temperature higher than what you want to cook it at. So for our pork Boston butt, we like to cook it at 190 degrees Fahrenheit for about 14 hours. All right, so we'll just give it to the pork. All right. So as you can see, we have our final product right here. Before you pull it, you want to check the internal temperature. So the temperature inside of the meat, you want to get it to about 180 degrees, sometimes 180, 190. So you'll just pick the probe right into the middle of the meat. You can tell when it's done because it goes in there pretty well. You don't have to twist it. So when it reaches 180, so ours is 182, perfect. Take your final product. As you can see, ours are double bubble. There. All right. So here we have our final product. It looks delicious and it smells even better. Unfortunately for y'all, I can't smell it. So you'll just start shredding this. You can kind of just start wherever. Look how easily this comes apart. It's beautiful, smells great. You can shred it to your own consistency, whether you like bigger chunks, smaller chunks. If you have kids, you might want them as small as you can get, and you'll put your final product in a separate bowl. As you can see, there is a bone in here, and it comes out fairly easily. Once you get it to 180 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit of the internal temperature, it comes out pretty simple. When you have this, so this is your scapula. This just holds your arm to your shoulder. And you'll just put that in a separate bowl, and you'll discard that later. So you'll shred your whole Boston butt into a separate bowl to your consistency. And then with that seasoning Lauren mixed earlier that she set aside for cross-contamination reasons, we'll add that in here. You can kind of put as much or as less as you want, and you'll just kind of thoroughly blend it in there until you have a nice consistency. Always taste test. You can't go wrong with taste testing. So there we are. It's really nice and pretty. Adds extra flavor in there. You'll just slap it on a bun and enjoy. And now we'll take it back to Brenna, where she can talk about a brisket.
Okay, I think we're good now. Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. So here we have our beef brisket. This is a whole beef brisket. We do prefer to smoke them whole in our catering group just because we do cater for a large number of people. And so for us, a whole brisket works pretty well. We do think that the product turns out a little bit more moist and we can kind of throw it in the smoker and forget about it for 12 hours. We don't have to do a lot of extra work to it because it is whole. So it's gonna have a lot more fat to keep the whole product very moist. So I know that most of you at home probably don't want to cook a 13+ pound brisket. Your Traeger, your Big Green Egg, or whatever smoke you have might not even fit one. So unless you guys have a really hungry teenage boy at home, you're probably going to want to cut this in half or buy something smaller. So you can buy what we would call a brisket flat and a brisket point or web, or if you guys want to save a little money and do some butchering yourselves, you guys can cut it up yourself. So today I cheated a little bit and I already cut it in half for you. But maybe Lauren, if you could take the iPad and show a little bit closer. Okay, so here is the side of your brisket that I separated it at, and you can see that it all came through with a pretty good seam. And by seam, I mean that I didn't cut into meat, I cut into the fat that separates the two pieces of muscle. And that's on all ends of this brisket. So now we have what we would refer to as our flat half and our point or our web. So our flat half is going to be good for smoking. It's going to be a little bit leaner, but it's going to result in really even, consistent slices because it doesn't have as much internal fat within the muscle. You do have to be careful not to cook this too long or make it too dried out because it doesn't have that extra insurance, that extra fat inside to make it not too dried out. And then we also have for you our web half or a point. So this is going to contain a lot more fat, but it is going to result in a little bit of a juicier product. So if you go to the South and you order brisket, you probably get told, do you want the lean half or the fatty half? This would be your fatty half. This is what you would make burnt ends out of, which would be cubed after smoking. I will say that when you buy these commercially, wherever you're buying them from, they do come with quite a bit of excess fat on the outside. So I would go ahead, don't be afraid to trim some off, not all, but some off. So I'm going to take off some of this hard fat here. I also might flip this flat half around. See if you guys can see that. So here, you can feel it's pretty hard. This has quite a bit of fat right here. So I'm going to go ahead and slice off some of this. And you're definitely going to want to leave some on because it makes it moister, but this piece of fat is not going to cook super well. I guess some people would want to eat it. It really just depends on your personal preference. And then same with this web half as well. So there's extra fat up here, and we have some extra fat here on the bottom as well. When we're seasoning these, you can make a seasoning just like we did for the pork rub. It would be a lot more salt and black pepper rather than the paprika or the brown sugar. But again, you can look online and find tons. We do use AC Legs brisket rub here. We have found that we can buy it in bulk and we get tons of compliments on our brisket seasoning. So it's just what we use. We don't make this one in-house. But just like we talked about earlier, we want to put 2 to 3%, which is really quite a bit. So don't be afraid to put too much. You're going to want to just sprinkle it on and then rub it in. And you're going to do that to all sides. I will say that when you're smoking a flat or a point, make sure you look online if you have whatever smoker you have, because they're going to smoke at different times. They're different sizes, they're different shapes, they have different amounts of fat, as I said. So they're going to smoke differently. So go ahead and look up and see what your smoker recommends for the point or the flat half. Okay, so now we're done here, so we're going to go over to the smoker and pull out a finished brisket for you guys.
Welcome back to our smoker. So as the same with the pork butt, we'll check the internal temperature of it. But for our brisket, we cook it at 190 degrees Fahrenheit, but we only cook it for 12 hours, so it can reach 180 degrees to 190 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll just find the smoker, we'll find the brisket.
So I'll go ahead and talk a little bit as Libby is waiting for her brisket to come around. As I said, we cook a whole. In the way that our smoker works, we can really just throw it in there and forget about it. At home, you guys might want to put a little bit more effort in. Some people spray it with an apple cider vinegar throughout. Some people will wrap it in foil for the first eight or so hours and then take it and uncover it just to keep it a little bit more moist. When in doubt, Google it. Look it up and see. We are pretty spoiled here that we have such a good smoker. We can really just throw it in and leave it. But at home, you guys might want to do a few more little things to it.
All right. Look at this final product. Beautiful. All right. So welcome to our Skanga dry aging area. Behind us, this is where we would have dry aged beef. Can you hear me? Okay. All right, now as Brenna talked about between the web muscle and your flat, you'll want to separate that so you can get even like good consistency cutting slices. So you'll just find that fat seam point and you can kind of just stick your hand in there and separate it. It's pretty simple. We'll just come around here. Doesn't take long at all. So here we have our brisket flat. And here we have the point or the web. So I know it's going to be kind of hard to tell, but you can see which way the muscle fibers, can you point to this? You can see which way the muscle fibers are running. And it's easier to tell when you cut it open. Yes. All right. So we'll just cut this bad boy in half. I'm also wearing a cut glove on my opposite hand of my dominant hand, just so I don't cut myself. So, as you can see, I know it might be a little hard to tell, the muscle fibers were running this way, and how I cut it, this is how we'll want to cut it because it leaves for a more tender cut. Oh yeah. So the darker ring, it's so tender it just falls apart. The darker ring around the edges is your smoke ring, and that gives it a lot, that's where a lot of that smoke is absorbed and gives it great flavor. So when you find those muscle grains, muscle fibers, they're going this way, you'll want to cut against that for your tender cuts. We cut it out about 1/4 inch thick, but the thinner you slice it, the better it is, obviously, because you just pile it on there. So we'll just do nice cuts. Burn-ins are the best. We'll just make nice, beautiful cuts. And as you can see, whoops, just falling apart. It's really nice and tender. As you can see, we cut against the muscle fibers, so it kind of just shreds. Very tender, very delicious. So once you cut your brisket and have it all ready, you'll do like with your pork and slap it on a bun and enjoy.
Okay, thank you, Libby. So that's all we had planned for you guys today. So again, we cooked for you a whole brisket, and then we showed you just the flat half for slicing. We also showed you how to season a pork butt and then some of that pulling, which is pretty easy. If you guys have kids at home, that's something that pulling that pork is pretty easy and a fun hands-on activity. And then we also talked a little bit about the beef carcass and some of those quality grades. So we now can open it up for any questions you guys might have. Hopefully I can answer them. And so go ahead and type the question in. Dakota, I think I can read them on here too for the chat.
Okay, great. We don't currently have any questions that haven't been answered yet, so we'll give people a couple of moments to put their questions in. In the meantime, some questions were submitted through the registration process, and I have those in front of me, so we will wait for folks to put their questions in the chat and we can jump on a couple of those.
Okay.
Could you talk briefly about kind of pros and cons or differences between smoking and grilling and which meats work best for which?
Mm-hmm. So when I showed that beef carcass earlier, I talked about those round and chopped cuts versus the middle meats. So when you're talking about grilling, you're not going to want to grill an item that has a lot of connective tissue, and it would be a tough product. So, for example, a brisket. A brisket would not be a good item to just grill because it would take a long time, first of all, and it's not going to it's not going to break down those connective tissues enough. So you're going to want to grill more we call the middle meats. Those would be your steaks, some of those skirt steak items, the tri-tip, but the tri-tip you're going to want to grill and then let sit for just a little bit so that it can heat up some of those connective tissues as well. And then smoking items would be, of course, the ones that we did today. There's a lot of different items you can smoke. I know people that also smoke middle meats. They'll smoke some T-bones or some New Yorks. It's just a little bit fancier. And so if you want to go ahead and test it out and see, you definitely can't go wrong smoking items. You can get maybe a very intense smoke flavor depending on the wood that you're using or how much smoke you're putting in there. So just be aware that you might get a very intense flavor that you're not used to if you're smoking some of those middle meats. So here I see a question, are there any items sold at athletic events like football games? So this year, of course, is a little bit different. We do typically cater for the tailgating for the Alumni Center. And so we do a lot of Southern style barbecue just because that's our specialty, especially for feeding, 500 people or so. But we do offer through our catering services, we do offer catering through the Alumni Association. And then I don't know if I talked about it, but again, this year for Ag Day, I'm not sure yet. But in the past, we have cooked for Ag Day. So we'll do the lamb specifically, and then we'll also help out with some of those other proteins. If they don't have enough smoker room or grilling room, we'll go ahead and cook some of those because along with our kitchen, we have 2 large smokehouses within the processing floor. So we have the capability to smoke a lot of meats for those large events.
Could you talk a little bit about marinating?
Yes, so marinating is not something that we do when we smoke just because we want that smoke flavor to really stand out, so we don't marinate. But marinating is a great option if you have overnight to let it sit, definitely to get some more of those flavors in. You can look up some things online and you can marinate with some different like acids, citric acids and things like that to make the product a little bit more tender. But again, just be careful. Don't overdo a pineapple juice or something like that because the bromelain will really break down the muscle fibers and make it more of a baby food consistency rather than having a nice meat bite to it. So we don't marinate any of our products here, at least for barbecuing. We will marinate if we do some different, like for example, we will do a thin cut steak on a sandwich. So a steak sandwich, sort of like a Philly cheesesteak, but a little bit different. We'll marinate that overnight just because we don't want to put too much salt on the outside, but we still want to get some good flavor in there.
Okay, we have a question. I don't know if you've heard of the method of feeling this part of your thumb to check the doneness of your meat. Someone wants to know if that's a good method or if you have any other tips for checking doneness other than.
So I'll preface that with saying that we're the Center for Food Safety and Quality. And so from a food safety standpoint, that is definitely not my recommendation, especially if you're cooking something that needs to be cooked to 165. So, I mean, I have also heard that, feeling your thumb and going like this for doneness. So for a steak, I mean, I would say check it first with a meat thermometer and make sure that it's meeting the safety requirement for whatever cut you have. And then you can go ahead and use that method, but you can never beat a meat thermometer, especially when you get into some of the items like a chicken or something like this. There's no way that you could tell if it was really done without checking it without a thermometer.
Okay, and then the last pre-submitted question that we have, what are some smoker brands that you might recommend for beginners or other resources for those new to smoking at home?
So we have used in the past, we have used a Big Green Egg that I've referenced a few times. Dr. Belk, department head, loves Big Green Egg. So if he's listening right now, he's probably chuckling. I know he uses his every week. So a Big Green Egg is really good for, I mean, I would say beginning to advanced, but it's something that you do have to know how to use it because you are you're creating smoke within that is made by a fire. So you have to check it fairly often. You'll have to open some vents and things like that. So it's a little bit more intensive and hands-on. I have a lot of friends that it's kind of an easier way of smoking would be the Traeger. The Traeger would be you put pellets in it, you plug it into the wall, and it creates the smoke for you. So it's definitely easier. They can, I mean, like anything, everything can be a little bit pricey if you make it pricey. So it really depends on if you want to just get smoke flavor and have it be pretty simple, or if you really want to learn more about smoking and you want to get more hands-on, you can go to any Shields or things like that. There's a couple different smoke stores within Fort Collins. I can't think of the name. And they have some different kinds of smokers as well. Some of them are intense and really hands-on. You have to watch them and you have to put different woods in and you sit up all night with them. And some of them are plug them in and walk away. So Chris is asking about, in addition to Ram Country Meats sold in the Where Food, so can you talk about additional Ram Country meat items sold in the Where Food Comes From market? Yes, so right now, unfortunately, we can't let people into the building. So we do have a really nice storefront, the Where Food Comes From storefront market. And there typically consumers would be able to look at different meat items and purchase what they want. We do have a few other Where Food Comes From verified items as well. Some granola bars and some things like that. So right now, we unfortunately can't let you guys into the building to see this new facility and show it off just with COVID. So we are doing storefront or curbside pickup right now. So if you go online, you can make an order, and we have, like I said, a lot of sausages available right now. We also are getting some more steaks in. We have some briskets. We have some top sirloin steaks. So you pick what you want, and then we won't give you a price right away because we need to weigh it out and see it's on a price per pound basis. So if you give us a day or so, we'll go ahead and shoot you an email back based on what was in your cart with the price total. And then you can come pick it up on the southeast side of our building, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday between 10 and 2 p.m. We'll go ahead and meet you outside. You can park right next to the tables that we have set up, and then we can complete payment from there. We are taking a lot of precautions. As you can see, we're all wearing masks. Everyone that was in this facility today has filled out a questionnaire for safety. And so we're really making sure that we're doing a great job to stop the spread of the virus and still be able to provide meat to the public. Donna said their sausages are great. Thank you. I know that that's something that, especially now, we've been focusing on because we were able to procure a lot of different cuts that make great sausages, like some of those pork shoulders, the pork Boston butts. And so we made spicy, we made sweet, we made fully cooked. We have a lot of sausages in right now. Along with ground beef, we have ground beef always. We have some patties. We made some jalapeno cheddar patties that are a little bit spicy. So we have a lot of options for people right now.
Okay, it looks like we're through all of our questions unless anyone submits anything else last minute. And unless, Brenna, there's anything that you want to add that you didn't get the chance to. I know you covered a lot, but before we close
I'm smiling right now. You can't see. I think that's all I had. I know that we're going to go ahead and send up a follow-up with some of the information. So we'll go ahead and put the pork seasoning recipe in there. As we said, that's just a beginning base. So, I mean, we even go ahead and take a spoon and test it just to make sure it's what we're looking for. But we'll go ahead and share any information we have. You can go to ramcountrymeats.colorstate.edu to purchase meat through our market. And then as things pick up again and events start happening, you can reach out to meatjudging@colorstate.edu for our catering services. We are doing some drop-off meals right now, but we can't physically serve just with different requirements that we have at the university. But thank you guys.
All right, well, I will just go ahead and close things out here super quickly. Let's see here. So thank you all again for joining us. And I'm going to echo what Katie put in the chat. All of the women presenting from Ram Country Meats tonight are so wonderful, and we're very proud to have them as Rams. So keep an eye out for the post-event email that we'll be sending. You should receive that later this week. It will include all of the information that Brenna talked about in regards to purchasing from Ram Country Meats, both right now during the pandemic as well as in the future. It'll also include some ways to stay engaged with the College of Ag and to continue learning about Colorado agriculture via connecting with their social media channels and upcoming opportunities like Ag Day this fall. Though we know it will look a little bit different and we're not quite sure how yet, there will be plenty of opportunities to connect. through that as well. So thanks again for being here, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.